Well,
Or if they're a set time.
yeah, if there's a time, but they're not all set.
Our meetings on Tuesday.
What I did is, today, I sent to the official newspaper all our meetings of all our committees and our standing committees, we're publishing it once, and then you guys can go on and look. The only time that you need to get a hold of me, is if you change the time of the meeting. And then it has to be so this way it's easier.
No, it's at 6 o'clock.
Yes. But see, the only thing is, that the insurance company doesn't need it on Thursdays. You need it at 4 o'clock. So I put that in the paper.
So one-time deal.
One-time deal.
Okay.
Gotta let me know.
Last week we met. Must be a reason.
See, and
Yeah, you
that's
know,
where,
I just looked really
see, and that's where some of this has to get me and say there's a labor management meeting. That's the only way I do it.
That's what started all this. That's what started all this. Okay, you're right.
Yeah.
Well, we just haven't announced it. No one's ever done it. Let's do it all night. Right. It's ostensibly, apparently it's not like this because the last meeting wasn't a committee meeting. That was a general meeting of the council.
Oh, the open meetings we had here. Right.
You gotta be careful. If you meet on a subject and then you add another subject to it that the public may want to come to, if somebody says, "You don't know about it, how do you meet?"
Yeah, but we always add stuff to the agenda.
Any public, you can add.
But what if it's,
You can add right tonight. I mean, sometimes he'll ask you, meetings or any additions.
Right.
You can do that legally. It's people just trust you.
start the meeting on?
Good, how are you? Next Sunday, I'll be ready to do it next week. Alderman Sahusky?
It's all right, Bob. And I'm a big horse guy.
Well, you know, when I was in my 20s, assume the position. I didn't miss a year. Yes, Captain? George fishing, I've been baby. Why, I understand. Like to fish.
Alderman Thompson?
Has left the building. We're done with the.
Yep.
Please rise for the pledge of the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
With all the disarray going on in the world today, Lord, close the door of hate and open the door of love and unity all over the world. Let kindness come with every gift and good desires with every greeting. We ask for your special care and blessings for our men and women in the armed forces who are defending us. Let the elements of war disappear and be replaced with world peace. Amen.
Amen.
So,
Clerk, call the roll.
Mayor Stafford.
Here.
Alderman Lincoln.
Here.
Alderman Sahusky.
Here.
Alderman Weston.
Here.
Alderman Cavallaro. Alderman Thompson.
Here.
Alderman Woodward.
Here.
City Attorney David Hawthorne.
Here.
All present except for 4th Ward, Your Honor.
Thank you. First item.
Whereas Edward R. Vanderhayden passed from this life on January 11, 2003. And whereas Mr. Vanderheyden was born and raised in the city of Fulton, a son of the late Charles and Lucille Blake Vanderheyden, he resided in Fulton all of his life. And whereas Eddie was employed by the city of Fulton as head of maintenance at the municipal building, he retired in 1996 after 31 years of service. And whereas Eddie served his city well in all respects, due to his honesty, integrity, dependability, and wonderful nature, he was a very good friend to very many people. Whereas he is survived by his wife, Christine Bartosik, a daughter, Stephanie R. Freilich, 2 sons, Michael E. and Mark D., all of Fulton, 4 sisters, Donna Dusciami of Austin, Texas, Sharon Vanderheyden of Florida, Carol Ann Hendricks of Hannibal, Linda Bartosik of Oswego, 4 brothers, Charles of Oswego, William, Roland, and Gary, all of Fulton, 6 grandchildren, and several nieces and nephews. And whereas the mayor and members of this common council, along with all of Eddie's friends and former co-workers, will miss this fine man who both personally and professionally touched so many lives. Now therefore be it resolved that the mayor and members of this common council share a great sense of loss with the family of the late Edward R. Vanderheyden, and do with deepest regret take official notice of the loss of this very special man. Be it further resolved that this resolution of respect be spread upon the official records of this common council meeting of January 21st, 2003, and copies of it transmitted to the immediate family of the late Edward R. Vanderheyden.
I'll offer that, Your Honor.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Joe, you
Yes.
wanted to say something?
Yes. When I came to work here in 1985, one of my responsibilities was the building, and Eddie worked with me for very many years while I had the responsibility of the building. Eddie treated this building as if it was his own home. He took special pride in taking care of this building. And for 31 years he did so. And there was never a time when anyone ever asked Eddie to do anything or asked him for anything that Eddie wouldn't do it. Many, many, many times he was called here in the middle of the night when we had a problem with the heat or the air conditioning, or if he had to come in and shovel snow blow it, get it ready for the public for the next morning. Eddie was always there. I can't remember Eddie ever being out sick all the years that I worked with him. Eddie, to me, would be a perfect role model for any city employee to follow. And if we had many more employees like Eddie, the city would be blessed. Thank you.
I also would like to mention that I had the privilege of working with Ed from the time I came on the police department in 1972 until I retired in 1996, or when he retired just before me. And again, you couldn't find a better employee. He went above and beyond his job description to get the job done. Through reduced workforces as they occurred, and just went the extra mile. And I was proud to have worked with him. We have many other fine employees now, but he stood just a little bit above, and will always be remembered for that. And if anybody wants to use him as a role model, he would be a fine role model to use. And we have some today that are using him as a role model, I know that. Next item.
Next item, Your Honor, would be the council briefing of the draft comprehensive plan.
Dan? You've got the floor. You may certainly.
Mayor and Mr. Keith, I was just reflecting, this one, can you hear me? This one? No. Is it on now?
There it is.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation here this evening. I was just reflecting, Mayor and Mr. Tetro, on your comments about Mr. Vanderhayden and his love and passion, of this building, really reflecting, his values about the importance that it was his home. In many respects, that's an illustration of the ad hoc committee that you appointed about a year and a half ago to address this comprehensive plan. They view this city as their home. They love it. They came through the many meetings, and indeed there were many meetings, long meetings. But their love and their passion about the city, its history, where it's at today, the circumstances, and their hopes for the future came through loud and clear. And they clearly have a vision and a passion to see Fulton have many, many decades of success going forward. And so the plan that's before you here this evening, I have the pleasure of presenting, but it really reflects the hard work of the committee. Many of the members are here this evening, Dave and Tony and Dick, Jeff, Sandy, Carol, Mark, there are others as well. And the mayors also participate on that committee. And what they ask us to do is to brief you on the plan. They have scheduled a public hearing next Tuesday, I believe here in these chambers, to present the plan to the community. And they really wanted to afford you the opportunity to see it, to comment on it, and if there are any changes that you'd like us to incorporate or at least reflect in that hearing, we'd be glad to do so. So what I'd like to do this evening is present the plan to you in brief form. You have received in advance copies of the documents, both the plan and the appendices. We literally could probably be here for 3 or 4 hours if I were to walk you through all the details. I won't do that. I'm going to try and get through this in about 30 minutes so you have an overview of the basic concepts and the framework of the recommendations. So what we'd like to address here this evening is the comprehensive plan, the process we used, the community assets that the committee reflected on that influenced their thinking. The committee did conduct a community-wide survey, which helped inform our thinking. We'll share some of the key findings there. The vision for the plan, and then the plan details. And of course, having a plan without an implementation does nothing. So we'd like to focus on implementation before the end of the presentation. So I'd like to start first on what is comprehensive planning. Some of you I know were involved 4 or 5 years ago in the First Street reopening. It's a very similar process to that, except it's much broader. It's citywide, so it's comprehensive. The comprehensive plan law that was passed by the New York State Legislature in 1992 established the basic concepts and the elements of the plan, which includes to be comprehensive. The plan should develop a shared vision for the future of the community defined by the goals of the community. And it really is intended to establish the long-term decision-making for public and private investments here in the city. So it's not really addressing about the immediate steps of tomorrow, although we frame those in terms of the immediate concept. We're looking 5 and 10 years out in terms of where the city is headed, and really answering the question through this work, what will be life like in Fulton 5 years from now and 10 years from now? Our basic building blocks were to start with your old plan adopted in '69. That was the foundation, and we supplemented it with additional information, analysis. That's reflected in this one document, the appendices. There's lots of demographics and economic analysis here, community survey, as well as discussions with the committee. So the steps we've been through, we've established the emerging concepts, which have led to a draft plan, which is what the committee has asked us to prepare or present here this evening. Based on comments we received this evening, we'll finalize the plan. We'll present to the public for public comment. Then we formally will advance the plan to the council. You will hold a public hearing, and then you are at your discretion at that point to adopt. So the sequences to keep in mind from this night going forward: the committee has a public hearing, they finalize the plan, forward to you, the council. The council in turn has a public hearing on the plan, and then it's your discretion with respect to adoption. So here we are tonight with the committee presentation. The assets in the setting that we looked at that influenced our thinking are illustrated on the next couple of slides. First, in the physical perspective, we recognize, Fulton is a community in transition. You look at it with, is the cup half empty or half full? And when you look at the full part, you have some wonderful assets to build around. These are the sort of assets that communities across New York State are trying to replicate. New communities that we're planning, these are the sort of things that they're trying to incorporate. Things like their waterfronts, whether it's the lake or the river, their traditional neighborhoods. And some of them are stressed here, but you have a lot of wonderful neighborhoods, and those are important ingredients to build the future of the community around. And you have critical public institutions, whether it's the War Memorial or the library or the schools, the City Hall. Those are investments that you have in the ground today. They're assets to work with. Great quality of life. It's really a walkable community. It's comfortable to enjoy as you walk around, great cultural resources, and great year-round recreational opportunities all seasons of the year. We also have some challenges. Demographics. You've probably seen these statistics. When you look at Fulton relative to the sister cities in the area, the city of Oswego and Syracuse, we do a little bit better in terms of the percent population change over the last 50-year period. We've had a negative 15% here in Fulton, whereas Oswego and Syracuse have lost multiples of that. But relative to the county, which has grown around us, we are struggling with a decreasing population. What that means is less and less purchasing power, economic activity, demand for housing. So that became an issue for us to address. It's further compounded with income levels. This is a look at the median household income for the city of Fulton, Oswego, and Syracuse. And we do pretty good on that benchmarks, or against those benchmarks, but when we look at relative to the county, we're not quite as well off, and as relative to New York State as a whole, the region is not as well off. Again, this has profound implications in terms of purchasing power, what people can pay for homes, which have then impacts in terms of tax base values and fiscal means of the community. So one of the challenges for the community was to look at, or the committee, is to look at, is there a way to diversify the demographics, the economic spectrum of who lives in the city, and start re-attracting the middle class back into the community. Another dynamic of the demographics is looking at ages. And it's interesting, when you look at, again, the comparison communities of Fulton relative to the cities around us in the county, on this end of the scale, where we're looking at 65 plus, we are a grayer, we are an older community. 17% of the city of Fulton in 1990 was of this characteristic, 65 years of age or older. It's in contrast to the county, where about 11%, so we're an older community relative to the county around us. On the other hand, we don't have as many youth in the 18 to 24 age bracket. 11% or thereabouts here in Fulton, whereas 13%. So fewer youth, more elderly people, and again, that affects purchasing power, it affects the dynamics of needs for housing types, it affects the workforce. And so again, one of the challenges for the plan is to respond to the needs of this diverse range of population here in the city, but also look for ways to, again, become more broadly diversified, attract a more balanced, if you will, range of age groups into the community. Of course, we don't act in isolation. What happens in the regional economy around us certainly affects the economic vitality of the community. So we looked at some key events over the last 15 years with the power plant expansion in Oswego, which helped drive the need for temporary housing and apartments conversions here in the city. And then the closing of the Miller plant, and then the expansion of Seal Wright and Hutamaki, and now obviously with the Nestle plant, long erosion of jobs and final closure. All those things affect the community. And what we've noticed when you look at not only Fulton's but also Oswego County manufacturing job outlook over this 10-year period, it's dropped pretty considerably from 8,000 down to 6,000 manufacturing jobs. That again has significant implications in terms of purchasing power and the type of workforce that and the expectations of that workforce here in the city. And what the committee talked about is this is a trend that's probably the recipe for business success in general, downsizing, right-sizing to be more competitive on a global basis. So what we're not saying is that we necessarily are going to attract a lot more workers here or companies here that keep growing that job base, because companies are actually downsizing to become more competitive. That's a circumstance that's going to affect all economies, including in Fulton. So the question for us was, how do we diversify our economic base here, not only to accommodate manufacturing, but other forms, tourism and high technology and things of that nature, so that Fulton can continue to provide employment. And further then, how do we connect to the regional economy, not just Oswego County, but think about Onondaga County and Syracuse. Think about that Route 481 corridor and the possibilities that Fulton might play in the regional context, not only for employment, but if we have attractive neighborhoods for housing, places for people to live. From a tax-based perspective, we found some interesting things here. We looked at the amount of land consumed by each of these land use types, and then the percentage of tax revenue generated. Industrial consumes about 5.5% of the land area and yields about 7.2% of the tax assessed value here in revenues, here in the community. Commercial, about 10% of the land area, generates 24%. This is why communities are so interested in commercial development. It helps pay the bills. Interesting, residential consumes about 42% of the assessed land area, pays 62% of the city, provides 62% of the city's tax revenues. So, as we look to going forward, one of the ways to grow the fiscal vitality of the community is to build up those residential values, not increase the tax rate, but see the property values increase. And that in and of itself helps generate a better economic balance, if you will, here from a fiscal perspective. It also begins to illustrate why residents become so stressed out over budgets. They're already carrying a heavy load, and add any more to that just further exacerbates the situation. We looked at a neighborhood level, what the single-family average assessed value is, looking at all these neighborhoods around the city. It was interesting, the Langdon area, Lanigan area down here in the southwest corner of the city has the highest single-family assessed value. We found a couple other neighborhoods that are significantly below, like the Phillips area here on the West 1st Street area, up on the 9th neighborhood, the 6th Ward, and then Sharps Pond area. These are significantly below the city value in terms of single-family home values. And that suggests to us an opportunity to, in bringing those values up at least to the city average, help lift the fiscal vitality of the community. Another way to look at it, though, was what the tax yield and the average revenue per acre of single-family residential property in the city. Just because an area may have lower or medium-scale values, when you get higher densities, like this area in the Dartmouth area, because of the densities, there's actually a high per acre value of housing in that area when you measure it on an acre basis, because they're small lots and a lot of homes scrunched in close together. So that's suggesting to us, an area like that, it's really incumbent on us to lift that neighborhood up to a very high quality, make it desirable, do what we have to do to make sure that investment occurs there and people are moving in and want to live there, because that's a very high yielding tax revenue to the community. That's just one example. The community survey that I mentioned, the committee distributed on a scientifically controlled basis, well in excess of 300 households that were sampled on a random basis. So we have a 95% confidence interval. We had a very high response rate. We were very pleased with the participation. And there were a whole range of questions. The complete survey is provided for you in appendices if at your pleasure, if you'd like to read it. But some of the key highlights, things that people told us in that survey are summarized here. Things that are on their minds that they'd like to make sure we address through the plan and in turn through policy was quality of life. The lake, surprisingly, came right to the top of important priorities. Promoting business to create jobs, not surprising in light of the economics that we just talked about, is a very high priority. Improving sidewalks, rebuilding the roads, promoting historic preservation of neighborhoods, improving housing through neighborhood revitalization. It's about quality of life, neighborhoods, and economic well-being. Those are the things that are on people's minds. And it was interesting how fairly balanced they are in terms of concern. They were also worried and concerned about the nitty-gritty stuff, like sidewalks. I mean, you think about it, it's in the scheme of things, it may be a relatively minor issue, but it received a lot of attention here. Why? Well, one reason is you're walking down a neighborhood street or sidewalk, what do you see? You see the homes, you see the sidewalk. And that sidewalk becomes an indicator of quality and state of repair. Now, it's easy to list these things. It's always another question about how do we solve them. And that's what we'll get to here in a minute. Some other things that we were told when we asked the question, what would make things better in Fulton? The commercial areas, better mix of stores, parks need to be better maintained. Just as importantly, the equipment needs to be updated to meet changing needs. It's reflecting, again, a community in transition. Neighborhoods, repairing the sidewalks, or this time getting the property owners to take better care of their homes. Tighten the standards for existing neighborhoods to achieve higher quality of maintenance and development. Same thing, it's about neighborhood preservation. And then in residential areas, there's little things that irritate you when you live in a neighborhood about where people park their cars, how they use the yards, where they park the recreational vehicles, limiting the time of building projects. Can you keep building a house forever? Even the materials of building. So a range of things that begin to affect people's perception about the vitality and quality of their neighborhoods. We always like to ask a question about taxes. What are you willing to pay for it? This is very revealing. First, would you support the use of property taxes to make public improvements? And we ask a whole list of questions. These are the things that came to the top. Neighborhood streets, abandoned properties, waterfront improvements, and parks. Then we ask, would you support increased taxes? And not surprisingly, characteristically, the percentage of support dropped. But what is important, it didn't drop to zero. There's a constituency group out there, at least a third of the community, that's saying these things are important to figure out how to get done. And so that's the art of what we need to do together implementing this plan, is to figure out how to get at these things in both a predictable as well as a regular basis. We asked what types of activities and services should be provided in the community. And at one level, they were telling us, well, you can make life better if we have more access to professional services and medical. Instead of having to drive to Oswego or Syracuse, if we had these services available. You might ask, well, is this something the city would do? Probably not, but you might set a business improvement district afoot to task them to go out and attract these kinds of uses, bring them here in the community to make life more livable. We heard things as well about shopping, outlet shops and specialty shops. It was interesting. People didn't say, bring in the big department stores. I think they recognized it's probably not going to happen, but what they did talk about are the little things that make life more amenable and livable in an urban area. Then the rest of these things, when you look at them, community teen centers, biking, riverfront access, expanded library, first-class restaurant, community events, theater, the common thread through all those is about bringing people together in the context of communities. Providing the venues and the activities that make the city livable. And some of these things obviously cost money, but other things, it's about how we organize ourselves to respond. So we learned a lot listening. So the vision of the plan was built out of this basic concept. 63% of the survey respondents love the city, but they also noted it looks worn out. We need to revitalize it. And what we recognize is we need to reverse this spiral of disinvestment in jobs and homes, which erodes the tax base, which erodes the ability to pay for infrastructure and services, which then makes it even less desirable a place to live. And so that's the downward spiral that we've been caught up in because of these broad economic regional impacts that have been affecting us. So just as these events link together in a downward manner, they can be reversed, and we can turn it around by beginning to invest in things like neighborhoods that help build the tax base, which help pay for more infrastructure, which leads to a higher quality of life. And what the plan recognizes, we do it in a step manner. We have limited capacity for capital improvements, but there are things we can do, which I'll talk about in a minute, that help turn this spiral around and start moving in the right direction. So the vision is to restore Fulton to a city of good neighbors. It's a place where business and neighborhoods can not only coexist but also thrive. And as Fulton reemerges as a strong player in the new regional economy, we're a home both for people where people can live and work. And the operative term here is the regional economy. To be thinking about the actions, the steps that we need to take as a destination in the regional market. Oswego to Syracuse. It's not just about what is happening here, but what's happening in the communities around us. And the nice thing about that Route 481 corridor, you can be in downtown Syracuse in 15, 20 minutes. It's a very easy commute. So we view that as our view and vision for the future. Let's be a community of choice for a place to live and work going forward in this century. So what are the plan recommendations? We identified 3 big categories. One is neighborhood stability, the second is economic revitalization, and third is quality of life. And they're all interlinked. Again, they relate back to that spiral. They work together to build the vitality. Under neighborhood stability, there were 5 goals, and then this whole series of recommendations. Briefly, the goals are improve housing conditions, strengthen the mechanism for preserving the character of each neighborhood, build neighborhood and community pride, maintain and upgrade the city's infrastructure, and to protect the neighborhoods from negative impacts of business development. The recommendations, some of these are inexpensive and others are more expensive, but this first one is inexpensive. Organize a response team through the mayor's office to address neighborhood issues in a coordinated fashion. This isn't our idea. Mayor DeChessie in Amsterdam started this about 1.5 years ago. It's where he pulled all his department heads together, and they went out into each neighborhood, a block at a time. They walked the street. They dealt with fire, safety, public health, code violations. And what he found, Mayor DeChessie found over time, after 3 or 4 visits, the media covered those trips, that neighborhoods, and they would announce the next week trip, neighborhoods started taking care of things on their own because they didn't want to be on that list during the next trip. Developing and implementing a balanced and diversified home ownership program. You have a great CDBG program. You need it. You've got the demographics that justify it. We need to balance it, though, with market rate housing and middle income investment. And there are other tools, such as the Fannie Mae programs, and there are others, that can be used to attract middle income America back into the community. Continuing to apply for the CDBG, we're a program. We're a firm believer in that because you can use it to fix your sidewalks and your streets and your sewer and your water lines and pay for housing rehabs. But you have to be careful you don't just concentrate it in one area. We need to balance that so that we don't, in an unintentional manner, concentrate low income in one area of the city. We want to make sure it gets balanced. Another tool you might want to consider, and we've underscored the word consider, use TIF financing, tax increment financing. When you have an investment project, you can use the increase in tax value to dedicate to the retirement of a infrastructure bond that can be used to revitalize the neighborhood. You need a real revenue stream to make that work, but it's a tool that can be useful to you. Expediting foreclosed properties to the tax rolls, and what we're not advocating here is a technique where you sell it to the highest bidder. You sell those foreclosed properties to the best use that will benefit the neighborhood. It's a whole different way of thinking about addressing foreclosed properties. And then diversifying the housing stock in the neighborhoods by encouraging development of moderate income market rate housing. I mentioned some of those tools. The plan goes on at length about that. Improving code enforcement, I think the operative term here actually should be consistent code enforcement, so you have confidence. And that's not easy to do because each of you are the folks that receive the phone call of someone that's being cited. But what happens is, with inconsistency, it can lead to a situation where after a while a block gets the perception that no one cares, and that can be counterproductive. Revising the zoning and design land use regulations to protect these neighborhoods. It's vitally important. If we want middle-income America to move back into these neighborhoods, they have to have confidence in their investment. They have to believe that those hard-earned dollars that are being invested will be preserved. Improving enforcement of the zoning regulations is another issue. Preparing detailed revitalization plans for each of the city's neighborhoods. You'll find in the appendices, the committee spent a couple meetings focusing on the neighborhood on First and Broadway down in the southwest corner of the city. Did a very detailed, extensive review of that neighborhood. It was just one that we picked out that said it looked like it had many of the same issues that you'll find in other neighborhoods, but it's a good model to follow about what this is recommending. The mayor's response team, working with the community development office, should go in and evaluate each of these neighborhoods with a neighborhood team and begin to pick away at these issues. It will provide guidance not only what needs to be done, but priorities in terms of funding. Developing a historic preservation strategy for the neighborhoods. New York State has varying tools, and some are being further developed, that actually promote tax credits for housing preservation. So it's something that the city needs to look at, and you're not going to have one district citywide. You'll probably have targeted districts in key areas that needs to be examined. And providing awards. Let's celebrate the good things that are happening. And there's plenty going on in Fulton that needs to be celebrated and recognized. In Saratoga, as we were beginning our reconnaissance in recovery, the Renaissance about 25, 27 years ago, they had the Onion and the Rose Award every year. Property owners that did a great job were recognized with a rose. You can figure out who got the onion. It didn't last too many years, but it got the message out. What was appropriate. Facilitating neighborhood discussions and action groups. This is developing ownership at the grassroots levels, so you have groups to work with. Encouraging volunteerism. I must say we were really pleased with the working committee, and if you can harness that same level of energy, vitality, and forward thinking in each of these neighborhoods, you can start really mustering some success. Developing a 5-year capital plan to make infrastructure improvements. I know it's tough when you have a tight budget to even think beyond this year, let alone 2 or 5 years out. But you have an aging sewer water infrastructure. At some point, it's going to wear out in a big way. It needs to be reinvested in. So what we're suggesting here is start developing a 5-year capital plan. You won't commit to funding the 2nd through 5th years. You're focusing on the first year. But it begins to set up some priorities and rational thinking about where you need to go and how you prioritize projects in all the wards around the city. Enacting a noise ordinance that really puts some real teeth into the amount of noise that can emit out of industrial plants. This is particularly important when we have neighborhoods that are butt up against these plants. And this is an issue that we find in just about every city that we work in. And it affects the quality of life in those neighborhoods. And the nice thing today is you have, through site plan review, there are mechanical means to dampen noise. It just has to be recognized and incorporated in the project. And then finally, applying the State Environmental Quality Review Act. Those of you that worked with us on the canal project, remember SEEKR? That was a mechanism to evaluate the project and anticipate issues. I remember we worked through some traffic studies there to figure out the right turning movements and those sort of things. That's a tool that you should use. Every project in New York State is subject to SEEKR. The only question is, what type of project is it and what type of review is required? So it's something that you have at your disposal, and not to become a burden on projects, because we're a firm believer if you identify the issues up front, you work with the engineers and the project sponsor up front, it doesn't cost them that much more to do it right if they know what the expectations are and what the regulations are. Where they really lose money is if they draw the plans, bring them in, find they're wrong, and they have to go redraw them again. Not only costs them time, it costs them money. Next is economic vitality, and this is focused on goals 6 through 11, creating an attractive functional environment. This is looking at, we need to diversify the economic base. And one of the issues is to attract tourism development and new residents into the community. Promoting historic preservation might seem like an odd place to put that notion, but from our perspective, by preserving these wonderful neighborhoods with historic homes, that can be an attraction tool if they're vital and the investments are seen as being secure. Advancing workforce preparedness. This is a moving target, but you need to continue to work with the community college to make sure the workforce is ready. Attracting high-tech employers. We're probably not going to see research and development centers here. We're probably not going to see front office, but we can see back office, we could see call centers, and we certainly can see high-tech production centers. If we have the ingredients of available sites, we'll come back to that, and the proper workforce, and a community attitude that this is what we want. And again, thinking about the relationship of the ease of the commute to Syracuse. It's very, very convenient. Creating a distinctive character for downtown to build market identity. You know, we've had, you know, the retail development that's occurred along 481, Broadway, Oneida, is kind of, you know, moved to franchise. And what we're advocating here is creating a distinctive environment again that really puts Fulton back on the map as being something special. It's exactly what you did with the First Street reopening on Canal Street. You made that a distinct place. And you know, the time is here to now taking those same principles and applying throughout your commercial district. Not necessarily exactly the same standards, but the same principles. And then diversifying the city's economic base in order to ensure employment opportunities and rebuild the economic vitality. Next, developing design standards to improve the character of development, coordinating the gateway improvements. This is the Route 481, the Broadway corridors. Developing a comprehensive historic strategy, improving the job readiness for residents, and then coordinating a knowledge-based high-tech business attraction program with Operation Oswego County. The issues that are affecting your community in terms of economic transition, job dislocation, they're certainly local, but they're being influenced by regional forces. And you really need to partner with those around you and make sure that A, you get their attention, and B, they're thinking in a coordinated manner to help Fulton position itself successfully in the regional economy. Preparing shovel-ready sites, the plan identifies, I guess there's 4 or 5 different areas. One is obviously the Nestle's plant. It's a terrible loss of jobs, but it does provide an opportunity now to rationalize that plant site, get the unusable buildings down, and let's look at remaking, you know, creating land. North on 481, above the Black Clawson area, it's another area where, you know, rationalization of those properties would help provide some inventory to you. Clarifying, expediting, professionalizing the development process. This means when an applicant, whether it's commercial or a business applicant comes in the door, you should be able to hand them a book that says, here's the process, here are the steps, here's the application form, here are the standards. We want your business. Do it right, we're going to make it easy for you. If you do it wrong, we're going to be your worst enemy. But make it easy for them, and set of standards and development process regs would help. Updating the zoning map to reflect the desired development outcomes. I'll talk about those zoning changes here in a minute. Continuing the physical improvements to downtown. There's the Bridge to Bridge project had a whole series of projects. You're partway there. Keep going. And you'll want to leverage grants. Some years you'll win, some years you'll lose. Keep going. You know, keep those projects in front of the state and federal governments. Implementing a niche market framework for downtown revitalizations. We work in communities all over the state. Tomorrow I'm down in Corning. You think of Corning, you think of its success, right, on Market Street. They too are dealing with the same issue. They have lost their market position. And what they're doing is repositioning Market Street now in the context of the region, demographics and employment. And that's exactly what Fulton needs to do as well. And there are market opportunities here. You need to discover them. You need to work with the business association, the chamber, to get an attraction program that will attract companies in to invest and set up shop here. And that also leads to the last recommendation of management framework. The chamber is a good vehicle to get this program started. Whether they are the long-term manager of the downtown is something the plan says we need to talk about. You need to think about. They need to figure out whether they want that role and in what capacity. And if they do, great. If they don't, because they have a broad range of things to deal with, then we need to think of another way to manage this downtown revitalization program. Fortunately, you have the leadership there at the chamber to get things started. You need to, encourage them, infuse them where they need help with resources. But long term, keep coming back to this question: what's the right way to manage downtown in terms of the change, business attraction, retention, and investment? Developing a tourism-based economy. This looks at the canal. It also looks at the lake, and the lake concept of attracting mixed-use development around the edges. We think is very sound. Building on your environmental assets such as the lake, and fostering small business or retail development. revolving loan funds, tools that help them locate sites and then set up shop in the business important. Establishing a model home occupation regulation. Not all businesses need to be in a storefront. Some can operate out of the fourth bedroom of a house if it's properly regulated. Again, we need to be careful not to negatively affect the neighborhoods, but there are ways to regulate this low impact, low levels of employment, low levels of delivery that you should encourage to take place. Then investing in sewer and water infrastructure, and then developing a city web page. Use it not only as a tool to talk about city government, but you can use it as a mechanism to convey events, and, things that are going on, and connect to activities around you. Finally, improving the quality of life. One is investing in the city's public institutions. And I'll talk about that in the library context here in a minute. Beautifying and greening the city, developing the city as an active passive recreational resources, with particular emphasis on the waterfront areas. It's distinctive about the city. Take advantage of it. Work to ensure that families, youth, and individuals are engaged and contribute to the community. It's about volunteerism. Promoting a multimodal transportation system. This is within the city, but also, again, thinking about connections to Syracuse as a means of center of employment. And then ensuring the protection of the city's important natural resources. So those are the goals. The recommendations are study the need for a downtown library and cultural learning complex. My hometown, Saratoga, undertook this type of project about 6 years ago. The library morphed and emerged into the town square, where you now have a cafe and computers. It's literally the hub of the community, where you not only can learn, but you can socialize, you can meet, and that's where community meetings occur. You have that opportunity here to think about the First Street area and the role that the library can play in terms of the renewal of that area. Continuing to invest in the city's recreational facilities, War Memorial, keep going, and the skating facility. Planting new and protect old existing trees. This is re-greening the city, making it, again, the view from the road. What do you see? Do you see a worn-out streetscape, or do you see one with, fresh, lush vegetation? Developing a strategy for dealing with abandoned, dilapidated sites and lots. This is that whole issue about moving properties back onto the tax rolls, as well as abandoned properties. And then developing and implementing a restoration program for the key city parks. Again, remember the survey finding. People are saying, keep the equipment updated, keep it current. Just because swings were popular 20 years ago doesn't mean it's the same level and type of equipment that we need today. Evaluating the role of the parks, and this is getting at the same point about repositioning the parks to respond to the needs of the neighborhood and the community around. Continuing to respond to the needs of the youth population, as well as the seniors, and then developing an integrated waterfront trail, continuing to invest in the there should be a and the pedestrian network, and focusing on the waterfront opportunities. So the committee spent a fair amount of time looking at a trail system. I won't go through the details, but this is the basic structure of a biking, hiking trail that can find its way through the city, either on streets or off streets in green corridors. This, again, builds and works to promote quality of life, and that's what we're finding the high-tech workers want today. They're making decisions of location choice based on the job, but also the environment that they're raising their family in. These are important ingredients. It used to be with economic development, we built the parks after the plan was done. Now we're building the parks and the trails to stimulate the investment. It's a whole different way of thinking about the role of these components of our communities. And of course, the lake, it's a wonderful resource. In fact, it got us thinking as a committee about this area right here, right across from the arterial, in terms of capitalizing it on it as mixed use. I'll come back to that in a minute. So the proposed zoning changes, I will say there were, probably 12 or 15 different zone changes recommended in the plan. In general, your zoning works reasonably well. Over the years, you've recognized the distinct nature of single-family neighborhoods. You've worked to rezone and protect them. But what we found is that just about every area of the city, there were these little transitioning areas, a lot or two, that need to be changed in order to better fit in with the adjoining commercial or industrial area and then the neighborhoods in behind. So let's look at some of these. The first area is downtown. What we'd like to do, the area between First and the river and Broadway and Oneida, is change the zoning from a strictly commercial to make it a more vital 24/7 living space, which includes high-density residential, hotels, and commercial. And take that same principle and apply it out at Bullhead Point. The next area is up on 481. Think about that industrial zone differently. So, where are we? Broadway, Oneida, First Street, this whole area, rezoned from a C2 district to a mixed use, which allows for medium-scale retail, hotels, parking garages, and up to 5-story multifamily housing. New way to build a new housing stock into the community. And it's a way also, if people are living downtown, they have ownership of downtown because now it's their neighborhood, and B, they're customers of downtown. They're also eyes on the street. It's a safer place if people are living there and paying attention to it. So we're looking at the area between the parking lot over here, between First Street and the river. You know, it shouldn't be a parking lot. Let's think differently about that as a building lot for housing. The area north of Oneida, up 481, Black Clawson, it's this whole industrial area, then across the east side, Ontario Street up, Harrison Street, that whole area. Today, you remember the single-family value map that we looked at earlier? This was one of the lowest value neighborhoods on a single-family residential property basis you have. I'm not surprised when you look at the range of mix of uses. It's so diverse that it's difficult today to have any kind of confidence that if you invest there, that it'll be protected. So what we're recommending is we change the zoning on this end of town from an industrial zone to a new, what we're calling a new C3 district, commercial district, which combines office, light assembly with design standards. So it makes it softer. You want to organize it in such a way that we have new land product there for office development on the east side of the highway. That would create a very nice step down in zoning to the neighborhoods in behind, which would be a very nice gateway then in terms of the approach to those neighborhoods. I talked about these little transitional areas up on Hannibal Street, the tissue factory. That's currently manufacturing right in the middle of a neighborhood. So what we're recognizing long term, it probably is not a great industrial site. Let's look at changing it to a neighborhood commercial with design standards so it fit. Right across the street, the Meadowbrook area, that's an R2 current zoning district. Predominantly though, it's single family. So we're recommending we look at changing it to a single family neighborhood to protect the integrity. And then down across from Bullhead Point on the arterial Route 3, we're recommending again a mixed use district. It's currently industrial over there, but look at mixed use of housing and light commercial that takes advantage now of the lakefront. You know, this wonderful investment, you've created a new address, let's use that address in the marketplace. Up on the west side, West First Street, I think it's Fulton Tools. It's another one of those little manufacturing areas that's evolved. You know, it wasn't manufacturing, it's morphed into a commercial area today. Let's recognize that in the zoning. Let's take away the potential of having, you know, an industrial zone right in the middle of this commercial neighborhood area. Change it. In a similar fashion, down on just south of Broadway on First, in the area of Beach and Pine, we have the shopping center that fronts on First Street. In behind, that same zone actually extends to the street behind, in fact, 2 streets behind. And again, your C2 commercial district allows for a broad range of commercial uses, which frankly negatively affect the adjoining neighborhoods. So what we're recommending here is changing those to a C1, is limit the kind of commercial activities that can take place in there, like professional office, medical. Maybe it's a neighborhood grocery store without gas pumps. The sort of things that would actually could thrive there because they don't need the visibility of the arterials, but they step down and they become quieter land uses that transition from the commercial area into the neighborhood. And it's these little things that will make a huge difference in terms of one's perception about the quietness and the integrity of the neighborhoods. They're simple, but we think they'll have profound impacts in terms of creating confidence in the market, and also probably calm some of the concerns that you hear in the community when you have commercial fitting up against neighborhoods. Over on Division Street, just on the south end of the Hudamaki plant, here's the shipping receiving area. That whole neighborhood is in transition again. And what the plan recognized here is the reverse. Let's push the zoning, change it to industrial, down one street, and let's change the zoning there to heavy industrial to suit the needs of the plant, and then put up proper buffering there. You're berming, trees, landscaping, you can buffer the noise. And then from that point south, let's change this, what's currently a neighborhood, but it's zoned industrial, let's change it back to residential, and give that neighborhood the confidence that if you invest there, that it's going to stay, as a home. You won't be threatened with the potential of industry coming in. So the trick and the challenge for the committee was to figure out exactly where that dividing line is. If we think we have it right, please take a look at it, see if you agree. We want to make sure we have it right. Over on the east side, a couple of streets along North 7th, Oneida, Erie, even Holly, and then Cayuga. We have these situations where we have these C2 districts or a residential current zoning, and these are areas that really should not be heavy commercial. Your C2 zones are too broadly written to end up in the middle of these neighborhoods. So what we're recommending is a C1 district, which really limits the kind of commercial activity that would benefit the neighborhoods themselves. So those are the zoning recommendations, all the plan recommendations. It's a lot, we recognize that. What we recognize is that you're not going to do it all at once. We're recommending a phased or staged implementation. An incremental approach is more likely, and also it allows you to achieve early successes, which allow you then to move to the next level. So what we recommend the council, when the committee finalizes its plan, what we will be recommending to you as the council is adopt the plan. You have the legislative right in New York State. You're the only body that can do so. So it's up to you to receive the plan. You can amend it as you see fit, and then if you choose, at your discretion, to adopt it. In adoption, what you're establishing is policy. This is a direction. You're setting a direction. You're not committing to specific projects. They will need to be examined, one at a time as they come forward. But this is setting a direction of intent. Once the comprehensive plan is adopted by you, your next step is to regulate. That's to update your zoning ordinance and map to bring it into conformance with these recommendations. Create task force to take on these different project areas, programs, and then prioritize projects. The committee put together a starter list of what they would recommend, and I'll review that here in a minute. One of the things, though, the committee felt very strongly about is plan leadership. We recognize that the council provides policy leadership, budget leadership, and working through along with the mayor, you are responsible to establish policy and direction and budget commitments. But you all have busy, schedules, and what we recommend, therefore, is that you task someone to be the plan leader that's responsible each and every day when they come to work. This is what's on their mind. What do we need to do today to implement the plan? And there are lots of different ways to identify that leader. It should be non-politicized. It could be inside of City Hall or outside of City Hall. But it needs to be someone that knows that they are directly responsible. And then they would be responsible to work with these different groups on neighborhood revitalization, quality of life projects, economic development, and implementation. And what the committee recognizes, they started putting together a schedule based on time, intermediate, short-term, and medium-term, in terms of where do you get started in each of these areas. The immediate are really working with the resources you have. A response team it's a matter of the mayor working with the department heads to get out, use the resources you have to start cleaning up code enforcement of the neighborhoods. That's using the resources you have on hand today. Creating a tree planting program. You work with the state's tree nursery, start growing trees, and in a couple of years, you'll transplant them out using your Department of Public Works crews. Developing an inventory of shovel-ready sites. This is paper time. It's recognizing what the plan has identified, the sites that are ready, that need to be made ready to go to market. And sometimes that means you need intervention with the state's brownfield program or Empire State Development on sewer or water investment or DOT, making sure those things are taking place and establishing a plan leader. That should be taking place this year, 2003. These programs should start this year, and they'll really get legs in 2004. Your Neighborhood Pride program, establishing a recreation trail improvement committee, conducting a downtown library study, conducting a downtown marketing niche strategy, adding, we believe you need a planning grant writer on staff. That's someone that actually can go out and seek funds to help pay for this stuff, so you can leverage your local resources and stay with it. It's not a hit or miss, try and do something at the end of the week, but regular commitment to helping the plan leader source funding to take on these projects. And then updating the zoning is something also that you should be starting following plan adoption. It'll take you 6 months to a year to go through that whole process. It just takes time from a seeker perspective to do that. And then working with medium term, working with other partners like Fannie Mae on home diversification programs. Quick side story, there are communities now that are beginning to partner with the manufacturing or institution leaders in their community to undertake these kinds of programs. Union College in Schenectady. Union provided seed funding to the city on a targeted neighborhood basis to entice faculty and staff to reinvest in the neighborhoods around the college. I think they provided a grant of $5,000 or $6,000 to those pioneers. Canisius College in Buffalo has done the same thing. Companies have done the same thing. So the art of this is to figure out who you can partner with, who might provide some seed funding to get this kind of program launched. So you're using private means, private mechanisms to get it started. Then you would couple that with the Fannie Mae program. There are insurance products on the market today that homeowners can buy that guarantee return on investment. If they buy a home in a pioneer targeted neighborhood, they have to live there for 5 years. If they move after 5 years, they're guaranteed the original purchase price of the home. And there's some really creative products out there, and those are the tools that we believe you need to look at in order to get the market's attention to come back into Fulton. Now, there are other things we need to do as a community to make the neighborhood safe, to make them pleasant, and to make them attractive. Working together, we can start changing the marketplace's perception around, and I think over time we'll start seeing the fundamental wealth of the community begin to move back up closer to the county and the state levels. Gateway improvements, the proactive economic development plan, and then the capital plan. Things that you want to start looking at in 2004 leading into 2005. So what we try to do here is recognize there's no way you can do it all at once. So you need to figure out what your priorities are. It's a tough fiscal year locally, at the state and the federal government. So our basic premise is let's start with what we can do locally this year and start setting the stage then for next year with capital investments. So leave you with a final thought. This is not our thought, but Ed McMahon's with statewide planning perspective. We can either be victims of change, or we can plan it, shape it, and emerge stronger. What we've learned in working with the mayor and the committee, you have a group of volunteers who want to achieve the success. And judging from the commitments this council has made over the years, recently with the canal project, you have that same perspective. And so I think by working together, you can start moving the community forward in a way that will be attractive destination for people to want to live and work in the region over the next 10, 15-year period. So that's the program. I'm sorry it went a little bit longer than I promised and advertised, but we get carried away with this stuff. It's fun. So why don't I pause there, see if there are any questions you have, any comments. If any questions that I can't answer, my colleagues will pitch in.
Yeah, I come to these meetings sometimes, I didn't come nowhere near as much as I should, but one thing I was wondering, we're trying to market tourism a lot more than we ever have. I mean, we're losing manufacturing. We can't compete with the electric rates in the states outside of here. That's just a fact, anybody that works in industry. I mean, it's not even close. So tourism's a big dollar. And I'm sure we looked at Pulaski and City of Oswego, right, when we did this? Why aren't we trying to market, we've got twice the riverbanks that Oswego does. Why aren't we looking at fish tubes? I mean, there's laws on the books that said that the salmon run had to be restored here. Why haven't we looked at that? That is a humongous financial asset to this community. What am I missing here? Is there somebody behind the scenes saying we shouldn't be doing this for some reason?
I don't know
lot of money.
specifically on that particular topic, but we absolutely share your perspective. You need to be thinking regionally. What the city of Oswego, Syracuse are doing,
But
what
we
the
gotta have
town's
the,
doing.
well, Syracuse, they're not gonna put the fish in Onondaga Lake.
No,
They got a big hotel up there and a whole bunch of stuff they're gonna try to sell. But for tourism, well, we can't compete with Destiny. I mean, we're lucky to get people at the mall, and nobody wants to go downtown since we tore it down and made whatever we made out of it. But there's a lot of people from outside the state that come in this area to fish. And we've got twice the geographical size between the bridges is a linear park, and the only thing we need is a rail. So, did we look at that?
those things need to be pursued. And,
Okay.
and you need to partner, that's what we're advocating, is partner with the communities around you so that the destination is bigger than just one place.
There's a
That's what
big
tourism
market
looking for.
there. I mean, we've missed that for years, and I looked at it in '86, because I had a fellow from Trouts Unlimited to send me a copy of the law that said they had to be restored to this river when they renewed the hydro projects, and we've talked about it, and the fish ladders were way too expensive, but now they put plastic tubes in there, like $500 for the whole run in East Hampton. That's not a lot of money. I'm just wondering why Fulton's been overlooked on that.
Anyone know? I don't know particularly specifically. It sounds like something that ought to be looked
No,
into.
but when you looked
Yeah.
at tourism, I mean, you know.
There's a lot of
did-
tourism
did you look
dollars
at-
coming
did
into
you
the
look
region, but
down
not the
there
city.
and see what they were doing and what was bringing the dollars in? Because, I mean, that's hotels, that's fast food, that's gasoline, that's the restaurants. I mean, that's the mall up here that's selling fishing licenses and lures. I mean, that's a big one. There's only so much money in this city. When we talk about the 17% seniors, we brought them here. We built 3 senior complexes, plus what we have in the neighborhood. Section 8 brought all the low-income people here. Now we need to market something that will give us something to give us some money back that's not here. We don't get that from the 17% that's on Social Security or the 11% that's on low income, or the ones that were working at the factories that are moving out. We need that from somebody that doesn't live here. So did we do, I mean, I'm just wondering, did we do that?
We absolutely agree with you.
That's a humongous asset. I mean, I hope the heck we're not looking at this for a few houses that live along the river so we can't utilize it to grow the rest of the city.
I think that's one piece of the puzzle. You're absolutely right.
It's a
It needs to
big
be
piece.
further developed.
Humongous piece for the financial end of it.
If I'm not mistaken, when they were relicensing the hydros on the Oswego River, that was part of the negotiations, was fish ladders, and wherever that went.
Part of it.
Between the utilities and the state.
Okay. Well, I know there's a law in the books that said they had to return the salmon run to the Oswego River. It's never happened. And I understand fish ladders from '86 and '87 are very expensive, but now they got these tubes, they're plastic. I mean, there's not a lot of money. You know what I mean? I mean, I work in industry and I'm in the maintenance end, and I know the Lexan tubes, if you got them 2 foot around, 40 foot long, you're looking maybe $1,000. and the hardware to put them in between the dams, so.
Speaking out of turn, but that's something probably the city of Fulton, Town of Minetto, where the dam is, and the city of Oswego has to get together and see if that could be implemented.
Well, I don't think it's up to them.
Build a fish ladder on the lower dam here because.
No.
So what I'm saying.
No, you're missing the whole point. I'm telling you, there's a law that says that run had to be returned to the river. And I don't think that one community can, I mean, that lake is stocked by the taxpayers of the state of New York. And the salmon fishing in Oswego and Pulaski is marketed by the county of Oswego, which we are all residents of. And I have a hard time believing that it shouldn't be spread out. I mean, I think there's the businesses there.
The city of Oswego owns the hydro plant in
I don't own the river.
no, but they have rights to the water.
Right, but the places, this needs to be further explored. It's a good example of a project that needs to be, pursued. There
I
is,
guess you've answered my question. We haven't looked into that.
Well, I think
That
the
wasn't
best
part of
answer is this plan does not
we're not
preclude
at that level of detail.
looking into that, Ron. That can all be done later as part of the
Okay.
long-range implementation.
The PSC and the hydro relicensing is also another place to look, because that would define those expectations about fish ladders. So that's another place to look. Good, thank you.
Thank you. Well, I know that in '86, the fellow that ran Niagara Mohawk, Bob Chris, I used to fish with him every Friday. And we got them to open the locks on the one end, and the salmon were up here. I mean, they were all over the place. And if you read the Oswego County landmarks, it's in the library. It was written in the late 1890s. We used to sell salmon from between the two bridges and export it to New York City and everywhere else. They were here, and they were stopped by the dams and the hydro projects. So something was taken away from the communities that there was a law in the books that said it was supposed to be put back there. And I'm just wondering if, you often wonder why things don't happen.
Sounds like a good project that needs to be looked at.
Okay.
Good, thank you.
On my read of the tax increment financing and the TIF bonds, this read seems to be geared more towards residential projects. Is there a recommended mix of residential versus commercial on a specific type of project?
Actually, you can use it for both, either commercial, or you can use it for a broad range of types, commercial, industrial, residential. We were applying it in the context of neighborhood revitalization, so that's why it was.
That's why I read it as residential, because I don't think it would work residentially based on where I would think it could happen. But from a commercial project point of view, I think it would work a lot better.
You may
I'm just
find
trying
over
to see
time-
if there was some type of suggested mix.
You may find over time, blocks will open up, where you want to remake a whole block, like around the Nestle plant, the parking lot, maybe the north end, all that won't be needed for, future commercial or industrial uses. So you might think about it as, partially a neighborhood. Or the downtown area, the First Street Riverbank area, that would be another area where this model could apply. And what you're looking for is enough critical mass of development that you can aggregate that throws off enough tax revenue that it's meaningful so you can retire the debt of a bond. The other thing you need is a real project. It can't be speculative.
Right, and that's why I felt with, residential, if he wanted to take, 2 blocks in his ward and tear them down and build new houses, the increment of additional tax revenue isn't enough to support any meaningful size of a bond issue.
That's
But
right.
if you're going to tear down 2 blocks of residential and build a huge factory, it would. So,
You're focusing on the right issue, which is you need critical mass, and that will vary depending on the nature of the project. A 4 or 5 story townhouse project on the riverfront, I think, would meet that criteria, just as an industrial or commercial project could as well. You want to make sure they're creditworthy, bonds, real bonds have to be paid for. But it's a vehicle for you.
I guess what I'm about to say will probably really not go over well when some people read it tomorrow, guys. But one thing that I had suggested about 6 months or so ago, Dave, was that the city annex the entire lake and build, what?
Don't tie me into your ideas. No, go
I'm
ahead.
just trying to look at, I thought if we annexed the lake, built a road around it, ran water and sewer out there, street, sidewalk, it would cost $5, $6, $7 million in infrastructure. But in return, with 200-foot wide waterfront properties, you can build a pretty nice house on the water. The city can see a reasonable return on its investment through increased property tax. Is that the scope that you're looking for?
That is, and we talked about, not that specific,
I mean, I've even got the list of the
Area,
11 people
in
that own
general.
property around the lake, and I want to talk to them, and which is why I don't really want to read about it this week, because I haven't talked to them yet. But, yeah, too late, exactly.
Our thinking was, if you take the same 7 or 8 million and you invest it in, these distressed inner neighborhoods, which already have a tax value, if we invest in the streets and the sidewalks and, places of those neighborhoods, you can have the same economic effect.
Well, I guess in the world of instant gratification,
Yes.
it makes a little bit more sense, at least this is purely my opinion, so you can disagree with me, but it makes more sense, I would think, to acquire virgin land, build, and realize value, and then assume, based on the financial dynamics of the project, that if you have waterfront property, it will become a destination. People will come to town to ride their jet ski on the water and to go fishing over by North Bay and do whatever. With the city being a destination, more people would be apt to buy the, for lack of a better word, leftover houses within the city, realizing that they're only 6 or 8 or 10, 12 blocks away from the lake, as opposed to piling money into his ward, my ward, my side of the river, hoping that 20 years down the road, the value of my house goes from 40 to 45,000. I mean, I guess, just a different dynamic.
I think our concern is the center of the community really represents the overall vitality of the city and the region. And as it goes up and down in value, it really reflects on the community at large. So it is important to make the core area of the community an attractive place to live and an attractive place for investment. And in so doing, will affect the community around it. So if you only have 7 or 8 million, and we put it outside the community, we lose the benefit of revitalizing the center. And the development will just...
Well, part of my plan would be that putting it around the lake wouldn't, at the time, be outside the community. I mean, that would be within the city limits eventually.
I understand the political dynamics of, geography dynamics of the annexation, but it still doesn't, our concern was it wouldn't address the core issue of rebuilding the center of the city.
But it would make funds available. It's hard to accomplish a lot with limited cash flow. And if you can increase the assessed value of the city by $70 million, you create a higher annual cash flow even at a lower tax rate, and the higher cash flow will lower property taxes and still generate money to revitalize the other areas of the city.
That's true. It's just a different way to think about it. The other thought that was occurring to us is, where can you source funding? And the CDBG program is about renewal.
But aren't there usually too many strings attached to that? I mean, how many times do I call Carol and say, I want you to spend your money doing this? Oh, we can't do it because, how many times I said, well, let's tear down this, let's tear down this, let's tear down that, and you can't, with your strings, you can't reduce the number of housing units, right? In fact, when we talked about privatizing part of Pathfinder Courts on the other side of town, I said instead of taking the $4 million or whatever it is they're going to get and rehabbing a couple of old buildings, I said tear it down and build new. But because it's reducing the number of units, and what I had suggested was reducing by, I think, 96 units, which again, in the economy would lower vacancy rate, increase rents, hence increase eventually property values, which increases tax revenue. It goes that direction. But because it reduces the number of units, federal funds, those strings aren't allowed. So,
It may mean you need other creative sources of funds to achieve what you're talking about.
well, did you bring your checkbook tonight?
And the reason for that is you do have excess inventory.
We have a ton of excess inventory. And the only way that you really solve some of the problems is to reduce that number by a meaningful number, not by 5 or 10, but by 100 and 200 and 300. And we've suggested several times to, over the last 5-6 years, with things like the housing voucher program. You know, if we have 400 subsidized units, you know, why not make it 200? And force landlords the hard way, and it'll be very painful up front with longer-term benefits, but force landlords to sell their rental properties and incent people to acquire them and convert them back to single-family. And in the short term, you see lower property values, higher tax rates, and a lot of pain, but through the pain, you get the longer-term benefit of fewer units, rising property values, and lower tax rates. Right?
We agree.
Okay.
We agree.
Then I have a stupid question. On the zoning recommendations, if we disagree with some of the ideas, no offense to everybody that really worked on this, but is this like AON? Is this all or none, or can we tweak the zoning changes?
What would be appropriate is for you to raise questions, and they'll be forward back to the committee.
Because
So next week
the
in the
only one that
public
really
hearing
stuck out in my
process.
mind was along Oneida Street. I know that the first few blocks are commercial, but really once you get past, say, 3rd Street, it's all residential. And I think the green circle on your map, if I can find it, the green circle on the map on Oneida Street, it's an underutilized commercial areas, when in fact most of it's zoned R1A. That's on, it's the map after section 4, page 12.
Well, that's the sort of input that we're looking for, and the
If there are
appropriate-
all houses there, I
Yeah.
can't see somebody putting a light industrial or whatever you want to call your recommended change.
To a C1.
Let's do a C1.
Right, and what's in C1 is light industrial.
Light commercial, neighborhood
Yeah.
scale commercial. But those are the sort of questions we're looking for. So if you have any of that nature, please forward them to us. The committee will discuss and again, recommend. Ultimately, it's the council's document. It will be up to you to receive. If you seek to amend it, that's your discretion, and then adoption.
The only thing I wondered is the only time the council normally does a public hearing to adopt something is because they're adopting something. When we adopt this, if we adopt this, does that automatically adopt all the zoning changes that are recommended, or do we piecemeal them out over here?
By law, any zone change you do in the future has to coincide with what's in this plan,
After we adopt the plan.
after you adopt the plan.
Doesn't change anything we have, only when we do zone changes.
Correct. But the plan also recommends strongly that there be some changes in the zoning in the short term. And I think if you don't, I think you have to make sure that if you adopt this plan, that you're cognizant of those recommendations and intend to follow them.
And so we got a week to make sure we're,
No,
No.
it's a week till we have a public hearing that's sponsored by the committee.
all right, yeah, right, we don't have to act on it.
You're not acting on this tonight or next week. This will be before you officially, probably another 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Okay.
You got time.
Don't feel that pressure.
Can I ask another
Deliberative process.
zoning question?
Yes.
How did you define underutilized commercial areas? Because I just looked at the map and I remembered another piece. There's a circle around the busiest intersection in town, 481 and Broadway. It's circled as an underutilized commercial area. Now, I know that Wendy's, Gosh Supply, and there's a gas station and there's
Fast food.
an old gas station that's now a used car slash whatever you want to call it. Because one of the four corners is not a major chain, that's what defines underutilized?
The criteria was level of site development, density development, level of activity. So you can have, on the north side of Broadway in that area, we have lower density activities going on in their storefronts. So that would be an example of underutilized.
But it's not really identified as a block, it's circled around really just the intersection. The circle goes through the actual corner parcels of property.
The idea was to.
I know the gas station gets a ton of traffic. I personally give Wendy's enough business. Gosh is pretty busy. That's going to, there are changes to the intersection that are going to take place, I hope, this year, isn't it, Mike? We hope, as long as the DOT cooperates. I just didn't know where you were going with that.
That was intended to be a general statement about potential, that we can see higher density, higher levels of activity in that area and get more value out of it. Now, certainly
Well,
there's
I
some.
only see the way that changes is getting rid of the one old gas station and putting in a brand name, a Shell station or something that we don't have in town. It's
Well,
really the only thing that's going to create more traffic at that intersection. Because God knows there's enough of it already.
It's not only traffic, it's sometimes
Oh, and
it's a
stops.
density issue,
And stops.
number of floors. So, for instance, that north side of Broadway, that block, if we had higher density development, that's a good example of how to get more value out of the real estate. The other corners, like Wendy's, it's probably built out for 20 years. You're not going to do much there. But what this is acknowledging is that's an important corner that's very visible, lots of drive-by traffic, and you want to get as much value out of that real estate as you can. In a similar fashion, as you scoot across the bridge, westerly on Broadway, a lot of underutilized properties there in a different context in that they're vacant. The upper floors are not used. So that's a different kind of underutilization. Each one of these areas has different circumstances. Up on the Tops area where the new Dunkin' Donuts is going in, there was a fair amount of out parcel land in that area that wasn't developed, as we deliberated with preparing the document. So there, the underutilization was characterized by undeveloped sites. So it was a different situation. Whereas down on Broadway, there are developed sites, but there's not much density of activity. So it's a different situation down there. And the goal was to just start thinking differently about these areas to get more investment and economic market activity onto those properties.
All right.
Another example was across from Bullhead Point. The industrial land is talked about rezoning. Okay, there's hit or miss, development in that corridor, but by and large, it's pretty low density. So you'd like to see higher density, higher value there, to build a tax base. And also, you could use it to create a pretty interesting place to live or work or shop. It creates new value. Any other questions? This is the sort of feedback we're hoping for. Thank you.
Do you really want me to ask another one?
Sure.
Because it's going to be more hypothetical than practical. Wouldn't you think that more large employment versus organic small employment would be a more important first step to allow the smaller organic development to follow? We sat in a meeting a couple months ago, and there are several people in the room say, boy, it'd be nice if we had a shoe store. It'd be nice if we had an antique store. It'd be nice if we had this. It'd be nice if I grew hair on my head again. The problem is you have to find somebody who's willing to pony up the actual American dollars to start a business or relocate a business in an area where people are going to buy their product. If I own an antique store, I'm going to go to a place where people have discretionary income to buy antiques. And in an area of higher unemployment than average and lower per capita income than average, Fulton, New York doesn't appear to be that place. which is why we tend to attract, based on our demographics, fast food, dollar stores, convenience stores. That's the discretionary income most available within the city limits. How, no, I don't want to ask that.
That's a great question,
The-
actually. Where do you get started? How do you get started?
Well, I think the way you do get started is you, again, my opinion only, is instead of focusing more effort on the small organic stuff, hoping that the two-man shop is eventually going to turn into a 200-man shop, I think it's more aggressive pursuit of larger employers, realizing that we do have larger employers that are leaving. You know, Nestle's is closing, Miller's gone, the can plant's gone, Owens is gone. You can go through the list, and when they come 5 and 10 at a time. When they leave 2, 3, 500 at a time, and the net loss is immense. And I do believe there's a big difference between, 10 high school girls making $6 an hour versus 200 positions where somebody can make a living and support a family. How do you propose or suggest to start the pursuit of large employment,
That's a great-
especially in light of technological deficiencies that we have? I mean, one of the suggestions you have is a call center, and there's been talk throughout the county of a call center in several locations. In Fulton, we have the inherent problem, or I don't want to say problem, but situation of having Alltel versus Verizon or NYNEX, so we don't have a lot of telecommunications capability within the city limits. It stops down the road. How do you fix that?
Well, those are great questions. The question is, how do you get started with rebuilding an economy? The challenge and the problem is communities across the state are experiencing the same thing Fulton is with the loss of these major employers. That's what's happening across the country. Big corporate America is looking to compete globally. They have to find lower and lower cost places to do business. They're in Mexico, they're overseas. India's the next wave. China will be the wave after that. Brazil. So there's about 1,800 to 2,000 site location projects that go on nationally that use that site location consultant network every year. There are thousands of communities across the country that are competing for that small handful of projects. So the question is, do we put all our energies into one mega project that might come along every 5 or 10 years? Or do we focus on the singles and the doubles in a baseball vernacular, where you look for the small companies, the small businesses, and you help nourish them and get them growing? And the reality is, you're going to do both. But we don't think you need to wait for the home run hit, of the big company to come along every 5 or 10 years. In the meantime, you have lots of entrepreneurial activity here in the city and the county. Set up an environment that is attractive to that kind of investment. And that means shovel readiness. It's all the programs that we talked about tonight. So it's not either or, it's a both. But start where you know you're going to have successes this year. And those are kinds of, the small scale projects are the ones that are seeing the most business growth and employee growth in this country.
Well, you could talk about what's going on in this country a lot. When you listen to Alan Greenspan say the economy's picking up, he obviously hasn't been through town. But outside the area and outside the state, things really are happening. I have friends that live out of state in areas where the real estate market, for example, is not red but white hot, and we don't experience that here. Again, attracting the mom and pop shops is a question of demographics and discretionary, spendable. I don't really want to say discretionary, but above and beyond food and shelter, spendable income. And with the lack of households supporting wages in the area, it's hard to it's hard to ask anybody to make the initial investment without a better-than-average chance that it's going to be around in a couple of years.
Well, to a large extent, it depends on how you define your market as well. If your consumer is a city resident only, it is limited. But remember the demographic slide that illustrated the county wealth was about a third higher than the city resident wealth? If you reposition your waterfront and your downtown to be an attractive destination for that audience, then suddenly it's a whole new dynamic about importing wealth into the community. Now, the question to ask is, how do you attract that audience? Well, you have some of those ingredients on the ground now. The Canal Lock restaurant serves a much broader market, I would guess, than the city resident market. Follow that same model. You want a mix of stores in the downtown area that really look to the needs, not only of the resident in the city, but the needs and the interest, niche needs and the interest of the county residents. You're not going to compete against Carousel. but
Nor
there
should we
are
try.
niche- Nor should you try. But there are niches that you can provide, specialty retail that provides an opportunity, special foods, specialty events. And that's the kind of nitty-grittiness, small-scale projects that when you start bundling them again together, create a destination. It's not too dissimilar what Oswego's done with their festivals, right? That's how they built the market up. Those are the same kinds of recommendations that we're looking here, only you do it around things that are authentic to Fulton. Don't replicate what Oswego's doing, but build in your own history. And if, salmon fishing is part of your history, then it's something that ought to be more fully developed.
Well,
It's a good example.
I can't think of a better utilization for the river. We combined throughway system with the canal system instead of lowering the rates for the trucks, so it made it better competitive for the businesses here. And we come out and put a lot of money to look at along the riverside, but nobody comes. I mean, it looks nice for us, but it really didn't do a lot for us other than make it look better.
Well, the way to think about it then perhaps is, it looks nice for you, that's great.
It looks nice for the big
And
boats that go through. So
What can we, yes it does, now what can we do next to attract a market, a festival or event or fishing, that we can attract other people to come and enjoy this
Outsiders.
water? Outsiders, exactly.
outside the county.
Exactly.
I mean, one thing I noticed in the county and tourism with the fishing industry, it's out-of-staters. I mean, when you talk about the Lock Restaurant, yeah, we've captured people outside the corporate city limits, which is in greater Fulton. And they're a clientele that are loyal. But it's still the same money. It's not outside. It's nothing different. That's what we need to do.
And that's what the plan focuses on. It's creating a community of interest that would attract outside dollars. Call centers, we know a little bit about that. We're doing Buffalo Niagara Enterprise call center study for Western New York, looking at how they can grow that market. The key ingredients are fiber, workforce, and ready-to-go sites. And as I understand it, Carol, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think one of the key impediments to call centers coming into this market was the lack of ready-to-go buildings. That's a key issue.
There's a lack of what?
Ready-to-go buildings, ready to go to the market. When they make a decision to go into a market, they want to be up and running in 3 to 4 months. They don't want to still be talking about it in a year or two.
Well, was it lack of ready to go because there wasn't enough floor and seat space, or because there wasn't fiber optic going into the building?
So, I mean, you look at, I've been through the Nestle plant. I don't know if there's any office space there that might serve, this kind of use. Think about it. It needs to be looked at as part
There's
of
a
your
lot.
economic strategy.
Miller's is only 17 years old. I mean, there had to be something.
Yep, that's another one.
Yeah, the brewery has 96,000 square feet of office space. The
Yeah.
problem is it doesn't have any fiber optic cable going into it to support the computer systems. And
Well, again,
Okay.
if you want to participate in that market, and you can, because they're looking at this corridor. The call center operations are looking at this corridor. It's a very rational, prescriptive set of circumstances that have to be in place in order for them to locate here. And they will not wait for you to catch up. So if it's a part of your economic platform,
I
it's
think
incumbent on
getting-
us to get prepared. Well, the sudden severe, impact with the Nestle closing, I don't know if there's a way to use some of those monies to prepare a site and to help get the fiber, Working coordination, is Mike managing the fund, the operations for the county? Okay.
From the Department of Housing and Urban Development to speak with us toward the end of the month as well about the long-term ramifications and to see if they can grasp something as well.
What they want to hear is, A, do you have a plan? Do you have a direction? And what are the specific investments that need to be made to reach that market?
Who's gonna pay?
Well, the bad news and good news with Nestle is it's a horrible situation in terms of local employment, but you're now on the radar screen in terms of being a community of need. So you leverage the jeebers out of that situation with EDA, the Economic Development Administration funds. EDI, they have different pots of federal funds that you should be tapping into. The call center market is very segmented. You're probably aware on the low end, editorialize, but the phone calls you receive at dinner time, that's the retail, they're selling you everything. That's at one end of the spectrum, and those jobs pay $21,000, $22,000, $23,000 a year. They have a turnover. They're looking at replenishing their workforce every 2.5 to 3 years. It's just the nature of that end of the business. On the other end of the scale are companies like Cable
Teletech.
Express down in Syracuse, which is selling high-tech routers and network systems to industry, and their salary range is 3 times that. Very technology-based. They're using a very high skill set, and they have a very stable workforce. And they're located on the north side of Syracuse. Why? Because they want to be close to the suburbs, which is where engineers and computer scientists live. Well, it's 5 minutes, to their plant or from their office. From the center of that suburban area, it's probably about 7 to 10 minutes to Fulton. So, you start thinking about how you can participate in these niches, recognizing on what they need.
But what do we do with the Fulton workforce? Teach them how to be these high-tech people?
Well,
Most
if
of
you
them
don't,
blue-collar workers.
if you don't, you will perish. You will absolutely disappear.
For most companies that do that, though, if you look at the bigger section of that market, it's more outsourced customer care.
Well,
And those companies that do that will teach the people themselves as part of the plan. They'll have a 12 to 18-month implementation period, and they'll sign up a customer, and it's generally on a 5 or longer year term. And in the first 12 months, they'll acquire the site, get it ready, and train the people before they even take the first phone call.
absolutely. And yes, you must see to it that the workforce is retrained. Because if you don't have a chance of becoming connected to the 21st century economy. You cannot continue to compete on the basis of being the low-cost provider. Because at that point, you're competing currently against NAFTA countries, Mexico. Before long, you will be competing against India and China. You can't compete. The United States' cost of doing business is too high, our labor rates are too high. So you need to be competing on the basis of adding.
The only thing
value.
that's not changes is the products they take out of the country and bring them back in some for the same price. Somehow we gotta smarten up and say, yeah, geez, that's a good deal, so.
So some of these issues you can't, in and of your own needs, directly affect. Workforce preparedness, that's a county issue. You need to be tuned into what they're doing and make sure that the workforce that they're preparing matches the sites that are within your control to develop, to bring to market. And so when Nestle gets redeveloped, north end of Clawson, north of 481, just 2 examples, there are others. Make sure those properties are being remade, reinvested, fiber. Take the old buildings down. They might be interesting old buildings, but they don't meet today's needs. Take them down and make sure you've got clean sites ready to go. That ought to be part of the exit strategy with Nestle as they pull out. You ought to be negotiating, what condition they're going to leave that site in. Get the state involved. It's important to the vitality of the future of this city to make sure those sites are redeveloped properly. That's your inventory. And they're expensive, they're difficult. been involved in a number of industrial sites, Bethlehem steel plants around the country, Rome, General Cable site. Those are all 3, 4, 5-year-long projects. From the point that you decide you want to, remake them and reposition them in the market, you go through brownfield issues and demolition issues, secure grants. It just takes time. But you need to get started on doing that because that's your inventory that's not being productive from a real estate perspective and from an economic perspective.
And we have to take advantage of anything we have that's vacant because we're pretty well built out.
Yes. That's right.
But on the workforce issue, one of the things that has been working in our favor is the relocation of Bugle Community College and the way that they have been expanding over there. They have over 800 students at this campus now, and it's expanding far beyond their expectations at this point in time. And that is, it's a high-tech center, and I think it's going to put out people that will be able to fill these high-tech jobs. And they said to get the jobs here, you have to have the educated workforce. So we're starting, I think, in the right direction.
Next issue will be sites and buildings and infrastructure. That's the next ingredient that these location companies are looking for. And it's speed to market that matters. When we're working in the industrial sector, manufacturing sector, the cycle from one generation product to the next generation, it used to be 18 months to 2 years, it's 6 to 9 months now. And it's just collapsed from a time perspective. And that's why they oftentimes, companies that are quick to market, will overlook these older urban centers. All they see are these problems, 3, 4, 5 years of time to prepare the sites. And so they move on to the greenfields for the obvious reasons we were talking earlier. It's not in their interest necessarily to see these urban centers redeveloped. It's in our interest. And that's why you seize the opportunities of the Nestle closings, and you just work the funding streams that you can out of Albany and Washington.
Yeah, but are we obligated to clean up their messes? Are we obligated to clean up their messes?
I think you sit down at the table.
Enough for them leaving?
You sit down at the table and you develop a reasonable plan. It will vary each and every time. If it's an orphan site, then unfortunately, yes. Orphan means if you don't have an owner, then it's in your interest to step in. If you have an owner like Nestle, then it's a different situation. I think there it's a matter of good negotiations.
Well, we've had owners before, just never paid the taxes.
Well,
Then they become non-owners.
I was sincere when I complimented the committee. Their passion and commitment to the future of the city is the same as yours, and that's something you have to work with.
No, I think this is a great deal. It's, it fosters questions, that's good. Because we gotta all do something pretty soon.
And the key is to set a direction, agree on the direction, and then incrementally start working towards it.
Yeah.
And I believe that's what the plan offers. The conversation we've had this evening about the details of the plan, that's really helpful. So you can either forward the comments directly to Carol or to the mayor, and we probably will not meet before next Tuesday's hearing with the committee, but at least we'll be aware of them, and we'll be able to address acknowledge them in the hearing. And then the committee will convene after their public hearing to address all the comments and reach final recommendation disposition of the plan. So your verbal written comments are welcome. We will acknowledge them next week. We won't be able to address them in time, but we'll certainly acknowledge them for next week's meeting.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Very nice presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very nice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dan, it's been a pleasure working with you on this ongoing project, but thanks to you and to Saratoga Associates, you've put an awful lot of time in and an awful lot of effort, and like downtown, it's coming together. And thanks to the committee and all the hours that we sat around tables chewing at one another and various items that were on the agenda and allowing me to vent. I appreciate that, but I think we came up with a good plan. Maybe we're going to have some input that's going to show that we need to make some changes here and there. But I think overall, we're in good shape. And I thank you very much for all the time that you invested in it. And now I have to, of course, ask you to invest more time and come to the presentation next Tuesday. Thank you very much. Next item.
Resolved, the minutes of the council meeting of January 7th, 2003 are hereby approved.
Motion?
I'll offer that, Your Honor.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Next item.
Resolved that the mayor be authorized to sign the agreement between the city of Fulton and Allison Merritt to provide computer web page development and maintenance to the city of Fulton for the months of February, March, April, and May of 2003.
I'll move it.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Next item.
Whereas Title V, Section C-70 of the Charter of the City of Fulton regulates the collection and disposal of garbage, refuse, and recyclables, and authorizes the charges assessed to the city to fund this function. Now therefore be it resolved that the Common Council, in accordance with the authority vested in them by Section C-70 of the Charter, City of Fulton sets the following charges. 1. Pursuant to Section C-70-11A, the charges for collection and disposal of garbage and recyclables is set at $29.01 per quarter for the year of 2003. 2. Pursuant to Section C-70-5D, the charge for collection and disposal of white goods is hereby set at $20 per item, effective February 3rd, 2003. 3. Pursuant to Section C-70-11A, the charge for collection and disposal of refuse trash is hereby set at $5 per item, effective February 3, 2003.
Mayor, just want to point out that the garbage charge at 29 is $11 a quarter cheaper than the last 2 quarters of last year.
Right.
For those people who didn't think we were actually going to
But
reverse it.
Overall, it is the same
Yep.
as annual
Yes.
as last year.
Right.
Yes.
So it
There
had to
was
be
no
doubled.
increase for
It
this
was
year.
doubled for the last 2 quarters of last year to make up for the first 2 quarters.
Right.
And nobody thought we'd give it back the $11, and there it is.
There it is.
And I'll move it.
I'll second it. I
Any
hope I
further-
get quit beating up about it.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Is there anyone in the audience that has any business to bring before the council?
My name is Darrell Hayden, which you fellows all know.
Yes, sir.
This gentleman that put on the presentation, that was pretty good, but if you'd ever like to talk to somebody why the people move out of the city folk to have a business, I used to have people come in here from Auburn, Casanova, Canada, ask me where there's a good restaurant, Chubby's, Black Restaurant. And Black Restaurant's well known up in Syracuse too. I had people come from all over the state. I can tell him why businesses move out of the city of Fulton. And there's reasons for it. Not only my own business, but when I was at Nestle's, there's reasons why Nestle reacted the way they did to the city of Fulton. So if anybody's interested, ask me some questions sometime. I'm free and available. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone on the council? First ward?
Nothing tonight, Your Honor.
Second ward?
No, thank you.
Third ward?
I just want to repeat what the mayor has said, that we certainly, the committee did an excellent job in their work and dedication, and I think the council has got the direction that they need, and with the changes that we're going to make, and we certainly can move forward and be very progressive.
Thank you. Good board.
I think I've said enough tonight.
Probably.
Probably too much, depending on what they write.
Again,
Yeah, it's been a long
again,
meeting, Harley.
Sorry.
No, Your Honor, other than, did a very good job, and, I had some questions, but I think it's good to get you thinking. I think it was an excellent presentation. I think that the committee's done a fine job.
Thank you.
That's it, Your Honor.
I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.